Don't drink that. Ethan Walker's voice cut through the ballroom 3 seconds before Claire Sterling raised the crystal glass to her lips. 200 guests went silent. Claire froze beneath the warm chandeliers of the Grand Marlowe Hotel, one hand still lifted, while Ethan crossed the final few feet between the service corridor and the CEO's table. He wore a plain charcoal work shirt with a Sterling biomedical badge clipped at his waist, the kind of employee most executives passed without ever learning his name. Tonight, every eye in the room knew it. Ethan reached the table, took Claire's glass from her hand, and replaced it with the untouched glass from his own place near the technician's station. Mr. Walker. Claire's voice was low and controlled. Explain yourself. Ethan didn't. He looked at the glass he'd removed, then toward the west entrance of the ballroom. Grant Mercer, Sterling Biomedical's chief operating officer, was already signaling security. Step away from her, Grant ordered. Ethan set the original glass carefully on the white tablecloth. He did not spill a drop. Keep this glass, he said. Don't let anyone clear it. A nervous laugh moved through the room. Claire's expression hardened. 20 minutes earlier, she'd announced a deal that could transform Sterling Biomedical into one of the most important medical technology companies on the East Coast. Board members, investors, department heads, and nearly every senior executive were watching her now. And a facility safety technician had just interrupted her toast, as if he had authority over the room. You crossed a line, Claire said. I know. Then tell me why. Ethan glanced at the glass again. Something in his face changed, not fear, not embarrassment. Recognition. Because you were about to drink from the wrong one. Grant stepped forward. That's enough. Security. 2 security officers approached. Ethan offered no resistance. That unsettled Claire more than an argument would have. He simply removed his employee badge and placed it beside the glass. Suspend my access if you need to, he said. Fire me tomorrow if that's your decision. But tonight, keep that glass. Claire stared at him. Why? For the first time, Ethan hesitated. His eyes moved briefly toward Grant, then back to her. Because someone expected you to finish it. The silence changed. It was no longer embarrassment. It was uncertainty. Grant immediately dismissed the suggestion as ridiculous and ordered the banquet staff to remove the table setting. Ethan's calm disappeared for exactly 1 second. No. The word stopped the server's hand. Nobody touches it. Claire looked from Ethan to Grant. She had run Sterling Biomedical for 6 years. She knew pressure, negotiation, bluffing, and fear. Ethan Walker was showing none of them. Security escorted him toward the ballroom doors. Halfway there, he stopped and looked back. Ms. Sterling, don't let Mercer touch that glass. Grant's face went still. Claire noticed. So did Ethan. Then the ballroom doors closed behind him. 7 minutes later, Sterling Biomedical's medical officer hurried into the room, crossed directly to Claire's table, examined the sealed glass, and asked who had been drinking from it. No one, Claire said. Why? The doctor looked at her, then at the doors Ethan had disappeared through. Because whoever switched this before you drank it may have just saved your life. 3 weeks earlier, Claire Sterling had not even known Ethan Walker's name. 3 weeks earlier, Ethan Walker was standing in his kitchen at 6:12 in the morning, trying to make a ponytail look like it had been done by someone who knew what he was doing. Dad, the left side is higher. Lily Walker studied herself in the reflection of the microwave door. I know. You said that yesterday. Yesterday was practice. Lily turned 8 2 months earlier and had already developed the patient expression of a child accustomed to her father's weaknesses. Ethan tried again. This time she approved. He packed her turkey sandwich, apple slices, and the chocolate chip cookie she was not supposed to know he had added, then drove 9 miles through Charlotte morning traffic to Hawthorne Elementary. Ethan never left until Lily disappeared through the front doors. For years after losing his wife, there were routines he refused to rush. By 7:35, he was inside Sterling Biomedical, wearing steel-toed boots and the charcoal shirt of the facility's safety department. Most employees knew him as the man who checked doors, ventilation alarms, emergency lighting, and the 100 invisible systems people only noticed when something failed. Ethan preferred it that way. He had been with Sterling for 11 months. He arrived on time, spoke when necessary, and noticed things other people walked past. A loose hinge. A temperature reading 2 degrees above normal. A security door taking 4 seconds longer to close than it had the week before. Lily called it his weird superpower. Ethan called it paying attention. At 9:20 that morning, he was inspecting an access panel outside the executive conference wing when something made him stop. The electronic lock showed 6 overnight entries. The building log showed 5. Ethan checked again. Same result. 1 entry existed in the local controller, but not in the central security record. Someone had entered the executive hospitality corridor at 2:17 in the morning, and somewhere between that door and the main server, the record had disappeared. Ethan photographed the maintenance screen and submitted an irregular access report. At 11:40, the ticket vanished from his dashboard. He submitted it again. At 1:15, it vanished again. Ethan stared at the empty screen for several seconds, then wrote the incident number on the small paper notebook he carried in his shirt pocket. That evening, Lily sat at their kitchen table coloring a solar system while Ethan made spaghetti. "You are doing the face," she said. "What face?" "The something is wrong face." Ethan smiled despite himself. "Nothing is wrong." Lily narrowed her eyes. "That is also the something is wrong answer." He set a plate in front of her. His phone buzzed. On the counter, a company email had arrived. Ethan opened it and read only 3 lines before his expression changed. His access report had not been deleted by a computer error. It had been formally closed as unnecessary. At the bottom was an electronic authorization. Grant Mercer, Chief Operating Officer. Ethan looked at Lily, happily arranging meatballs around her spaghetti like planets, then back at the name on his screen. He had never spoken to Grant Mercer. More troubling, a Chief Operating Officer should never have needed to see a routine facilities ticket in the first place. The next morning, Ethan arrived 20 minutes early. Before clocking in, he checked the executive access controller again. There was another missing entry. Same corridor. Same erased record. This time, Ethan did not submit a report. He wrote down the time, closed his notebook, and looked toward the private elevators leading to the executive floor. Someone inside Sterling Biomedical was removing footprints, and Ethan had just realized the person doing it knew he had started looking. Claire Sterling began every workday at 6:45 in the morning, 23 floors above people whose names she rarely had time to learn. At 36, she had spent 6 years turning Sterling Biomedical from a respected regional company into a national competitor, and almost everyone around her considered that proof she had everything under control. They were wrong about one thing. Control required constant attention, and Claire had forgotten what life felt like without it. Her penthouse overlooked Charlotte, but most nights she returned after 10 to rooms so quiet she could hear the refrigerator running from the hallway. At work, silence was impossible. Investors wanted growth. The board wanted certainty. Department heads wanted decisions. And Grant Mercer wanted one signature. "The acquisition closes after the gala," Grant said that Thursday morning, placing a blue folder beside Claire's coffee. "Once the board approves it, we move immediately." Claire opened the folder. Sterling was preparing to acquire a smaller medical technology company whose diagnostic platform could add nearly $80 million in annual revenue. The opportunity was enormous. So was the risk. The compliance audit is not finished. It will be. Grant smiled. "You hired me to keep problems from reaching your desk." Claire looked at him. Grant had worked beside her for 5 years. When her father became ill, Grant had kept the company moving while Claire learned how to lead it. Trust, once earned, was something she did not revisit without reason. Finish it before the gala. Consider it done. An hour later, Claire was walking toward conference room 4 when she found a man in a charcoal facilities shirt standing in front of the closed doors. "This room is reserved," she said. "I know." Ethan Walker did not move. Claire glanced at his badge, reading his name for the first time. "The board is meeting here in 8 minutes. Not in this room." Claire was not accustomed to employees answering her that way. "Excuse me." Ethan pointed toward a small indicator above the door. "Ventilation sensor failed inspection. Until I verify the backup system, nobody uses the room." "Move the meeting somewhere else," Grant said behind her. "We do not have time for this." Ethan looked at Grant, and Claire noticed something strange. It was not hostility. It was recognition without familiarity, as if Ethan had finally connected a voice to a name he had already been studying. Grant noticed it too. "Is there a problem?" he asked. "Not with the ventilation anymore," Ethan said. Claire's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" Ethan opened the panel, made one final adjustment, then closed it. "The room will be cleared in 15 minutes. Grant stepped closer. "You were told 8. Ethan met his eyes. Safety does not change because the schedule does. Claire should have been irritated. Instead, something about the answer stopped her. Everyone in her world adjusted themselves around her authority. Ethan Walker had just inconvenienced the chief executive officer of his company without apology because he believed the rule mattered more than her title. 15 minutes later, he reopened the room exactly when promised. That afternoon, Claire happened to look through her office window toward the employee parking lot. Ethan was crossing toward an old silver pickup when a little girl ran from the after-school shuttle and wrapped both arms around him. His entire face changed. The quiet employee from the hallway crouched to listen as the girl excitedly showed him a paper covered in bright stars. Claire watched for only a moment before turning away, strangely aware that nobody had ever waited for her with that kind of joy. Behind her, Grant entered carrying the acquisition documents. "Walker needs to learn where his authority ends," he said. Claire looked back through the window. Ethan and Lily were already driving away. He was doing his job. Grant's expression barely changed. "Then let us make sure that is all he is doing." That evening, Grant returned alone to his office, opened the internal security system, and searched one name, Ethan Walker. By Monday morning, Ethan had stopped treating the missing access records as a software problem. He checked the executive hospitality corridor before most employees arrived and found nothing visibly wrong, which bothered him more than a broken lock would have. The door worked. The camera worked. The local controller recorded every entry correctly. Only certain entries disappeared after reaching the central system. Someone was not breaking Sterling Biomedical's security. Someone was using it exactly as designed, then cleaning up afterward. Ethan copied the times into his paper notebook and compared them with maintenance records from the previous month. 3 unusual entries. 3 missing reports. 3 different nights. Each involved an area temporarily assigned to Grant Mercer's operations team. At 9:10, Ethan requested archived access data. At 9:18, the request was denied. At 9:26, Grant appeared beside him in the service corridor. "You have developed an unusual interest in executive security." Ethan closed the electrical cabinet. "I have an unusual interest in records disappearing." Grant smiled without warmth. "You maintain the building, Mr. Walker. Information security belongs to another department. Then they should probably know their information is disappearing." Grant's smile faded. "Stay inside your responsibilities." Claire heard the final sentence as she stepped from the private elevator. She looked from Grant to Ethan. "What is happening?" Grant answered first. "Mr. Walker has been requesting restricted records unrelated to his position." Ethan reached into his pocket and removed the notebook. 2 access events were removed from the central log after I reported them. "Removed by whom?" Claire asked. "I do not know." Grant exhaled. "Because there is nothing to know. We updated permissions during acquisition preparation. He is turning routine administrative cleanup into a security concern." Claire looked at Ethan. "Do you have evidence that anyone entered illegally?" "Not yet." "Then stop investigating outside your department." Ethan held her gaze for a moment. "Put that decision in writing." Grant gave a short laugh. Claire did not. "Why?" "Because if I am wrong, you lose nothing but an email. If I am right, someone will eventually ask who told me to stop." The elevator seemed unusually quiet. Claire's expression cooled. "You will receive it in writing." Ethan nodded once. "Thank you." He walked away without another word, leaving Claire more irritated by his calmness than she would have been by defiance. That evening, Ethan spread 3 printed maintenance schedules across his kitchen table while Lily worked on a school project beside him. He had removed every confidential detail. What remained were dates, room numbers, colored maintenance codes, and his handwritten notes. Lily leaned over while reaching for a blue marker. "Why do you have the same little triangle 3 times?" Ethan looked down. "What triangle?" She pointed. On each schedule, beside the nights with missing access records, a small triangular symbol marked temporary hospitality service authorization. Ethan had assumed it was a routine event code. Lily tapped the pages in order. "Blue, blue, blue. And this one is Friday." Ethan followed her finger to the 4th symbol. "Friday, the night of the Sterling Biomedical Acquisition Gala." He checked the location beside it and went completely still. "Grand Marlowe Hotel, Executive Hospitality Service." "Dad," Lily asked. Ethan folded the pages carefully. "You just noticed something I did not." She grinned. "Does that mean I get extra dessert?" "It means you get exactly 1 cookie." After Lily went to bed, Ethan opened his company laptop and searched the authorization history. The 4 hospitality requests had all been approved through the same executive account. Grant Mercer. Ethan stared at the screen, then noticed one additional attachment scheduled for Friday evening. A private service list for Claire Sterling's table. He tried to open it. Access denied. A second later, the file disappeared from the system entirely. Ethan slowly closed the laptop. Someone had just erased it while he was looking at it. Friday evening, the Grand Marlowe Hotel glowed above downtown Charlotte while black cars moved steadily beneath its entrance canopy. Ethan arrived at 5:40 in his charcoal Sterling biomedical shirt, carrying a safety checklist and the uneasy feeling that someone already knew he had been asking questions. His assignment was ordinary: verify emergency exits, coordinate with hotel facilities, inspect temporary electrical connections, and remain available during the gala. He preferred ordinary. Ordinary meant everyone went home safely. By 6:20, more than 200 guests filled the ballroom. Claire Sterling stood near the stage in a midnight blue suit, moving from investors to board members with practiced confidence. Ethan watched from the edge of the room, not Claire herself, but the movement around her. Servers, executive assistants, hotel staff, Sterling employees. Grant Mercer crossed between groups as if he belonged everywhere. At 6:43, Ethan noticed the first detail. The service station assigned to Claire's table had been moved approximately 20 feet from the location shown on the hotel plan. He asked a banquet supervisor why. She checked her tablet. Executive request. From whom? Sterling Operations. Ethan said nothing. At 6:51, he noticed the second detail. One server placed a small white marker beside Claire's glass before leaving the table. It looked harmless, the kind of marker used for dietary requests, except Claire's place setting was the only one marked. Ethan asked another server what it meant. The young man frowned. I do not know. That is not ours. Across the ballroom, Grant was watching him. Their eyes met for less than a second. Grant turned away first. Ethan took out his phone and tried to access the hospitality service list that had disappeared from the company system. Nothing. At 7:14, Claire stepped onto the stage. She spoke for 11 minutes about the acquisition, the employees who had built Sterling Biomedical, and the responsibility that came with growth. Ethan barely heard her. He had found the third detail. The server assigned to Claire's table had changed. The original server was now working near the ballroom entrance and seemed confused when Ethan quietly asked about it. They told me executive operations reassigned the table, she said. Who told you? I thought it was your company. Before Ethan could ask more, applause filled the ballroom. Claire had finished speaking. Champagne was being poured for the closing toast. Ethan moved toward her table. Grant intercepted him halfway. You are working the perimeter tonight. Who changed the service assignment? Ethan asked. Go back to your station. Who changed it? Grant's expression hardened. This is exactly what Claire warned you about. You are outside your responsibilities. Ethan looked past him. Claire had reached her seat. A server placed a glass beside her right hand. The small white marker was gone. Ethan saw something else near the base of the glass, a faint residue where a removable service label had been peeled away. Then he remembered an executive emergency briefing from months earlier. Claire had a severe allergy listed in the response file, important enough that hospitality staff were required to follow a specific beverage protocol at company events. Ethan looked toward the service station. Claire's designated bottle was still there, unopened. His attention returned to the glass in front of her. It could not have come from that bottle. Move, Ethan said. Grant stepped into his path. Do not embarrass yourself. Claire lifted the glass. Ethan walked around Grant. People began noticing. He crossed the final few feet just as Claire brought it toward her lips. Do not drink that. The ballroom fell silent. Ethan removed the glass and replaced it with the untouched one he had carried from the technician's station. Claire stared at him, stunned and furious. Grant immediately called security. Ethan set her original glass carefully on the table. Keep this, he said. Nobody touches it. Mr. Walker, explain yourself, Claire demanded. Ethan looked directly at Grant. I cannot prove it yet. That answer cost him whatever patience Claire had left. Your access is suspended effective immediately. Ethan unclipped his badge and placed it beside the glass. Understood. Security approached. He went quietly, but before reaching the ballroom doors, he turned back. Have your medical officer check what was in that glass before anyone disposes of it. 7 minutes later, Dr. Rebecca Hale entered the ballroom expecting a precaution. She examined the service records, checked the glass, and requested an immediate screening. When the preliminary result appeared, her expression changed. She walked directly to Claire. Do not drink anything from this table. Claire lowered her voice. Why? Dr. Hale looked toward Ethan's badge beside the untouched glass. Because Mr. Walker had a reason to stop you. Dr. Rebecca Hale asked the hotel staff to close the service station and leave every item exactly where it was. Her voice remained calm, which made Claire more uneasy than panic would have. Around them, conversations had collapsed into whispers. Board members who had been celebrating minutes earlier now stood beside untouched glasses, watching the chief executive officer at the center of a situation nobody understood. Claire lowered her voice. "Rebecca, tell me what you found." Dr. Hale glanced toward Grant Mercer before answering. "The preliminary screening indicates your glass contained an ingredient connected to the severe allergy listed in your executive emergency file. The concentration was enough that I would not have wanted you taking even one sip." Claire stared at the glass. For several seconds, she said nothing. Could this have been a catering mistake? Grant asked quickly. "Of course it could," Dr. Hale said. "But her designated beverage bottle is still sealed." Grant stopped speaking. Claire looked toward the ballroom doors. "Bring Ethan back." Grant stepped closer. "Claire, we should let security handle this." She turned to him. "I said bring him back." For minutes later, Ethan returned without his badge. He walked into a room that now regarded him very differently. Claire noticed the change immediately. An hour earlier, most of these people would have passed Ethan in a hallway without seeing him. Now they moved aside. Ethan stopped several feet from her. "You knew?" Claire said. "I suspected." "How?" "Your emergency response file." Grant seized on the answer. Why would a facilities technician have access to the chief executive officer's medical information? "I do not," Ethan said. "I have access to emergency response requirements for areas I inspect. No diagnosis. No private medical details. Just the safety protocol necessary to keep people alive." Dr. Hale nodded. "That is standard." Ethan pointed toward the unopened bottle. "Her events require a controlled beverage service because of the allergy protocol. That bottle was logged for her table. The glass she received did not come from it." Claire's anger had disappeared. Something heavier replaced it. "And you saw that from across the room?" "I saw the service station had been moved. Then the assigned server was replaced. Then the marker on your place setting disappeared. Any one of those could mean nothing." Ethan looked at the glass. All three together meant I was not willing to gamble. Claire glanced at his badge still lying on the table. "I suspended you." "Yes. And you still protected me." Ethan's expression did not change. "Those are separate things." The answer silenced her. Grant cleared his throat. "We are wasting time. The hotel has cameras. We identify whoever mishandled the service and resolve this." Ethan turned toward him. "The cameras will not resolve it." Grant's eyes narrowed. "Why not?" "Because someone has been deleting access records inside Sterling Biomedical for 3 weeks. The missing entries all connect to temporary executive hospitality authorizations. Tonight was the 4th. Claire looked sharply at Grant. "You told me those were administrative updates." "They were." Ethan removed his notebook from his pocket and placed it on the table. "Dates, times, locations, incident numbers. Every report Claire had ordered him to stop pursuing. 3 warnings disappeared before reaching your office," Ethan said. Claire slowly opened the notebook. Grant reached toward it. Claire put her hand over the page before he could touch it. For the first time that evening, Grant looked uncertain. Ethan noticed. "There is something else," he said. "The person who changed your service wanted us to focus on the drink." Claire looked up. "What else should we be looking at?" Ethan turned toward the ballroom, where several board members were already gathering their coats. "The vote." Claire followed his eyes. The acquisition vote had been scheduled for 8:30. It was 8:24. Ethan spoke quietly. "I do not think you were the real target tonight. I think someone needed this meeting to stop." At 8:26, Claire Sterling closed the ballroom doors herself. Nobody leaves until the board understands why this vote was almost interrupted. The room quieted. Grant Mercer stepped toward her. "Claire, delaying the acquisition over an unverified theory could cost us millions. Then 2 minutes will be inexpensive." She turned to Ethan. 3 weeks earlier, she had not known his name. 20 minutes earlier, she had suspended him. Now every senior executive in Sterling Biomedical was waiting for his answer. "What should we look at?" Ethan opened his notebook. The timing. He placed 4 dates on the table. The first 3 matched the deleted access events. Each occurred shortly before an internal compliance review connected to the acquisition. Each review had been postponed because records, equipment certifications, or executive access documentation required rechecking. "Tonight follows the same pattern," Ethan said. create a problem, delay the next step. A board member frowned. But tonight's incident would trigger more scrutiny, not less. Eventually, Ethan replied. But not tonight. Claire understood first. The audit. Grant's face remained controlled. The audit is routine. Claire turned toward him. You told me it would be finished before the gala. And it will be. It is Friday night. Grant did not answer. Claire called Sterling's compliance director, Margaret Ellis, and placed the phone on speaker. Margaret answered from home. Claire asked one question. What remains unfinished in the acquisition audit? Silence followed. Then Margaret said, the vendor certification files from operations. We requested the originals 3 times. Claire looked at Grant. Why did I not know that? Because my team was resolving it, he said. Ethan remained quiet until Margaret mentioned the certification dates. Then he looked at his notebook. They matched 2 of the missing access events. Claire saw it too. Margaret, do not alter anything. Preserve every file exactly as it is. Grant shook his head. This is becoming absurd. No, Claire said. It is becoming documented. For the next 40 minutes, Claire did what Ethan could not. She used the authority of the chief executive officer to lock preservation controls on internal records, suspend non-essential system changes, and authorize an independent compliance review. Ethan did what Claire could not. He traced the physical pattern. Executive corridors, hospitality authorizations, temporary access permissions, and maintenance tickets that disappeared after he submitted them. Neither had enough alone. Together, the pattern became difficult to dismiss. At 9:17, Margaret called back. Claire, we found duplicate vendor certifications. The versions sent to your office do not match the originals. Grant stood very still. Claire asked, who approved the versions I received? Margaret hesitated. Operations. Nobody needed the department explained. Claire did not accuse Grant. She simply removed his system authority pending investigation and instructed outside counsel to preserve the records. Grant looked at Ethan. You think you understand what you found? Ethan closed his notebook. No, that is why I kept asking questions. Grant was escorted from the executive area without spectacle. Claire watched him leave, then looked around at the employees who had witnessed her suspend Ethan earlier. Mr. Walker. Ethan faced her. Claire picked up his badge from the table. Your suspension is withdrawn, effective immediately. Ethan did not reach for it. That does not fix what happened. The words landed harder than anger. Claire lowered her hand. No, it does not. Dr. Hale approached with an update from the hotel security team. The altered service request had been routed through credentials connected to operations, but the investigation would determine who actually used them. Claire nodded, refusing the easy conclusion. Then Margaret's voice came through the speaker again. Claire, there is one more thing. Ethan filed 3 separate warnings before tonight. None were routed to your office. Claire looked at him. 3. Ethan nodded. 3. And after I ordered you to stop, I stopped using the system. Claire glanced at the paper notebook in his hand and finally understood why he carried it. Why did you keep looking? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Because deleting a warning does not delete the problem. Around them, the ballroom had gone completely still. Claire Sterling had spent years believing leadership meant having the final answer. Tonight, in front of her entire company, she turned to the facilities technician she had nearly removed from the building and asked the question nobody there expected. Ethan, what do you think we should do next? By Monday morning, Ethan Walker's badge worked again, but almost everything else inside Sterling Biomedical had changed. Outside counsel had taken control of the investigation. Grant Mercer remained suspended from all company systems. The acquisition vote had been postponed, and every executive authorization connected to the missing records was being independently reviewed. At 9 o'clock, Claire stood before nearly 100 employees in the main conference hall. Ethan remained near the back, exactly where he preferred to stand. Claire could have issued a company email. Instead, she spoke herself. On Friday evening, I suspended an employee for interfering with an executive event. I made that decision before understanding why he acted. Ethan Walker identified a safety risk, followed evidence that had repeatedly been kept from my office, and acted when hesitation could have had serious consequences. I was wrong. No excuses followed. No mention of pressure from the board. No attempt to shift responsibility onto Grant. Ethan noticed that. So did everyone else. Claire continued. Effective today, no safety or compliance concern can be closed solely within the department named in that concern. Independent review will be mandatory. That mattered more to Ethan than the apology. After the meeting, Claire found him checking an emergency lighting panel on the 7th floor. You came back. Ethan kept his eyes on the panel. I have a job. Most people would have made me work harder for that answer. I am not most people. Claire almost smiled, but the expression disappeared quickly. Can I ask you something? Ethan closed the panel. You are the chief executive officer. That is not what I asked. He looked at her then. Claire had spent the weekend reviewing his reports, reading every warning she had never received, and replaying one moment she could not explain. After I dismissed your concerns, ordered you to stop, and suspended you in front of the company, why did you still protect me? Ethan was quiet. Because Lily was watching. Claire frowned. Your daughter was not at the gala. She did not need to be. Ethan slipped his screwdriver into his tool pouch. She watches what I bring home. She watches how I talk about people who make mistakes. She watches what I do when doing the right thing costs something. Claire said nothing. Someday she is going to decide what kind of person she wants to be, Ethan continued. I cannot tell her character matters and then make exceptions when I am angry. Claire's eyes lowered. You saved someone who had just refused to trust you. Whether you trusted me had nothing to do with whether you deserved to get home safely. That sentence stayed with Claire all afternoon. At 5:30, she did something she almost never did. She left the office before sunset. Ethan had forgotten a folder containing revised safety procedures in her conference room, and Claire could have sent it by courier Monday. Instead, she drove 12 miles through Charlotte traffic to the address listed in his employee file. Ethan opened the door wearing jeans and a faded gray shirt, surprise crossing his face when he saw her. Miss Sterling. Claire, she said. Outside the office, at least. Before he could answer, Lily appeared behind him holding a wooden spoon covered in pancake batter. She looked up at Claire with open curiosity. Are you Dad's boss? Claire hesitated. Technically. Lily considered that. Are you the lady Dad was worried about? Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. Lily. What? You were. Claire looked at him. He was worried about me? Lily nodded. He kept making the face. What face? Claire asked. The something is wrong face. Ethan finally smiled despite himself. Claire did too. It was the first conversation they had shared without a boardroom, an emergency, or an accusation standing between them. Claire handed Ethan the folder, but Lily was already returning to the kitchen. We made too many pancakes, she announced. You can have some. Ethan looked toward Claire, giving her an easy way to refuse. Claire thought about the silent penthouse waiting 12 miles away. Then she stepped inside. At the kitchen table, Lily talked enough for all three of them, and Claire listened. She learned Ethan always burned the first pancake, that Lily loved astronomy, and that Ethan never missed school pickup unless there was an emergency. Claire also learned something less comfortable. Ethan's life was not empty space waiting for her to enter it. It was already full of responsibility, memory, and love. If she wanted his trust, she could not purchase it, order it, or promote him into giving it. She would have to earn it. When Claire left an hour later, Ethan walked her to the porch. Thank you for dinner, she said. Thank Lily. Claire nodded, then looked back through the window at the little girl clearing 3 plates from the table. I intend to. Ethan watched Claire walk toward her car. For the first time since they met, neither of them was thinking about who had authority over whom. 3 months later, Ethan Walker stood in the same executive conference room he had once closed for a failed ventilation sensor. But this time his name was printed on the glass beside the door. Director of Safety Integrity. Claire had offered him the position twice. He had refused it once. The first version required travel, late meetings, and the kind of schedule that would turn school pickup into something handled by somebody else. Ethan had slid the offer back across her desk. Lily does not get a second childhood. Claire had not argued. 2 days later, she returned with a different proposal. The job ended at 4:30 on ordinary days. Remote work was permitted when appropriate, and emergency coverage rotated among a newly expanded team instead of depending on one person. Ethan accepted that version because Claire had finally understood the difference between rewarding a man and respecting his life. The independent investigation had finished the month before. Grant Mercer was permanently removed from Sterling Biomedical, and the evidence surrounding the altered records and vendor certifications had been turned over to the appropriate authorities. The acquisition eventually moved forward only after a complete outside audit. It took longer. It cost more. Claire never complained about either. She rebuilt the reporting system so that safety and compliance concerns could never again disappear inside a single department. Every report received an independent tracking number. Every closure required review. Every employee, from senior vice presidents to overnight maintenance workers, could raise a concern without asking permission from the person being questioned. Claire called it accountability. Ethan called it a good start. Something else changed more slowly. Claire began leaving the office before dark at least twice a week. Sometimes she joined Ethan and Lily for dinner. Sometimes Lily invited her to school science nights with the casual certainty children use when they have already decided someone belongs. Claire never tried to replace anyone. She asked about Lily's mother when Lily wanted to talk about her. She listened when Ethan told stories. She learned that joining a family was not the same as erasing the person who had once occupied a place within it. Ethan noticed that more than he said. One Saturday afternoon in early spring, Claire arrived at Ethan's house carrying groceries instead of paperwork. Lily was building a model of the solar system across the kitchen table. "Claire, you are late," she announced. Claire checked her watch. "By 3 minutes." Lily pointed toward Ethan. "He notices that." "I have noticed." Ethan looked up from the stove. "I was going to let it go." "That sounds unlikely," Claire said. Their smiles met somewhere in the middle. Dinner was simple: roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans, and lemonade. Nothing about the evening resembled Claire's old life of catered meetings and silent rooms above Charlotte. That was precisely why she had come to value it. After dinner, Lily carried 3 glasses to the table and poured lemonade into each one with extraordinary concentration. Claire reached for hers, then stopped. She looked at Ethan. "Am I allowed to drink this one?" Ethan studied the glass with exaggerated seriousness. "I checked it twice." Lily rolled her eyes. "Dad checks everything twice." Claire laughed, but Ethan saw something softer behind it. Months earlier, a glass between them had represented suspicion, hierarchy, and everything they did not know about each other. Tonight there were 3 glasses standing side by side. Claire lifted hers. "To checking twice." Lily raised hers immediately. Ethan followed. "To paying attention," Lily corrected. Claire looked at Ethan over the rim of her glass. "Your daughter is usually right. Do not tell her that." "Too late," Lily said. Later, after Lily went upstairs to finish her science project, Claire stood with Ethan on the porch beneath the warm Carolina evening sky. "I used to think you saved my life that night," she said. Ethan looked at her. "You are going to tell me I am wrong?" "Not exactly." Claire glanced through the window toward the kitchen, where 3 empty glasses remained on the table. "You saved something I did not know I was losing." Ethan understood. He did not rush to answer. That was one of the things Claire had learned to love about him. When he finally reached for her hand, she let her fingers settle into his. No promises made for an audience. No grand announcement. Inside, Lily called down that she needed help with Saturn's rings. Ethan smiled. Claire squeezed his hand once. Then they went inside together.